Camera options.
It's okay. I'll figure it out.
I'll try to. Yeah. I'll look into it too and see if I can figure it out. But
cool.
I won't keep doing it to rub it in your face.
No. Absolutely do it because
that would be bad.
The budget, man. The budget we've got for this show now is through the roof.
Yeah.
Do you know how much we've spent on rain?
yeah, we had to have that stuff shipped in from overseas. Whatever. I don't even know where this episode is. This episode already started? Are we?
I guess that's a good little segue into it.
We started with once again trying to figure out how to get the special effects on Eddie's camera. So once again, it's a thing that the podcast listeners are like, just who the fuck cares? Get to the fucking music talk, which is what we do here on Cranked and Ranked. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I am Old Head. That's Eddie Sparxx.
That is me. Yes.
And we're back to rank another band discography. This one was a suggestion by Eddie Sparxx. This is not a band that I'm into. Okay. I know some of their stuff. Well, I know all of their stuff now. But the band is Machine Head. And I mean, they've been around for, quite a while. They got 10 albums, and we're going to rank all 10 of them today. But I'm all like, I'm just jumping into it. So we start off by talking about where this band came into our lives. I never heard a Machine Head album in the 90s.
Wow, okay.
Didn't, if I did, it just went and it didn't connect with me and I didn't care. I didn't actually listen to a full Machine Head album until The Blackening. And that's only because around that time, at my
huge hype around it.
Also at my job, I remember, in order to have things to listen to, and I used to like to listen to podcasts and stuff. There used to be a Metal Hammer podcast.
Yeah.
And I liked listening to those dudes. And I don't even remember who was hosting at that time, or if it's even still a thing. But they would hype up certain albums, and I would go check them out just because I'm like, well, if people that are into the more current metal scene are saying this is good, I'm gonna go listen to it because I want to know. So
I want to know.
Oh, give me a sign,
girl.
Ooh, all right. We already did Living Color.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I liked things about that album, but I didn't get into them. And then every other album they've put out since then, I've heard when it came out, and it didn't really do anything for me. But I have to give you some sort of an idea of how this ranking is going to be. So I think it was on Friday, or because where we record these on Sundays. I think it was either Thursday or Friday. I remember I was drinking my coffee and I went, oh shit, I gotta listen to all the Machine Head albums and rank them. And then then I go, oh wait, no, I already did that. I listened to all of the albums and wrote down notes and then completely forgot that I ever listened to the albums.
Oh shit.
They completely went out of my brain. Nothing. And so I went back and looked at my notes. I was like, oh, well, it makes sense. Because what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to read you my notes every time I get to an album. Because to be completely honest, I don't have a lot to say about any of their albums. Because I wouldn't call any of them bad. I wouldn't call any of them great. So it's like this weird middle ground where I'm like, I can't really be Michael Graves Misfits and be like, fuck this. And I also can't be like, I don't know, how we were during like the whole Rush or Kiss episodes or Metallica, where I'm just like, so many good things here. It's going to be all sort of a lot of just like, it's all right. So that being said, like I put them in an order and I went back and looked at the order and I was just like, I don't remember why I ordered them this way, except for the notes that are on the paper. It was so weird. I mean, I don't know, because I just turned 46. Yesterday was my birthday. And
happy birthday.
Thank you.
I feel like a bad friend.
No, it doesn't matter.
Happy 46.
Thank you. And so there's that part of me that goes, is that a senior moment that I had, or was it literally the music? Was it the music? So I'm going to say it was 50-50. It was old man brain that's got so much shit going on in it, and the Machine Head music didn't attach itself on as well as I would hope. Much like the purple hair dye that I tried to do. Can you even tell that you can't? You can't anymore.
I can a little bit. I can see.
I mean, I have purple lights on behind me too. But yesterday for my birthday, I was like, I've always wanted to dye my hair a weird color. And so I got a couple jars of Manic Panic purple, and my wife like put it all on my hair, and we did the whole thing, and it came out with like kind of like a purplish hue. But then I took a shower today, and it's already coming out again. So
I'm starting to notice it now a little more. I think the lights are in a strange way kind of obscuring it. But
but the good thing is that I like how it looked. I go, oh, that's great. So now my wife's like, well, what we got to do is then we're actually going to have to go through and we're going to have to strip your hair. We're going to have to bleach it and then do it again if you really want the purple to come out. And I'm like, you know what? At 46 years old, I think it's time to have purple hair. And so that's what I did, but it just didn't come out. I mean, it was a good experiment just to see if like when there's a weird color in my hair, do I immediately go, oh no? But I didn't. I was like, nope, this is cool. I want to do this.
Yeah.
So, because I always remember seeing like the biggest one for me is in the mid '90s, Max Cavalera had like purple and pink and green like all in his hair, and I was like, that's so cool. I just want to do that. And so now I'm like, well, why don't I do that? Like there's nothing stopping me from coloring my hair an odd color. So that's where I am in life, ladies and gentlemen.
Come to think of it, now that you bring up funky hairstyles, while it's on my mind and it's a good little segue, I remember noticing around like the nu metal era of Machine Head, Dave McClain had done his hair to, it was like short, it was really short, like buzzed.
Yeah.
But, there was enough hair to do stuff with it. And he had like an orange leopard print head.
Yeah.
Was it Dave McClain 1999? Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's pretty cool, to be fair. Where is it?
Dave McClain, who is the drummer for Sacred Reich.
Yes.
But at that point, obviously he wasn't at that point. But.
There you go. I've just sent it to you.
Oh shit, okay.
Yeah, just for a live reaction. It's one of the most nu metal things I've seen.
Yeah. That whole picture is just nu metal. You've got Rob with the spiky
frosted tips,
spiky frosted tips, the nose ring, and then the chin. Whatever that's called, it's lame. Don't ever do that. But and all the necklaces. Yeah. I'm gonna, there's gonna be hot takes about that era of the band as well, because I didn't go. I just listened to the albums. I know I've seen at least one or two music videos from that period of the band, and I always really enjoyed them. But now it's even better because there's so many nu metal tropes. Like everybody's like looking sideways at the camera, and their guitars are all real low. And just like, man, everybody did that shit. Everyone was like, I got to color my beard and I got to look sideways at the camera and I got to do songs about how I'm just a freak.
Wearing a PVC orange tracksuit.
Yeah. look back on it fondly now.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I feel like, and this is kind of my critiques of modern metal of at least the last 15 years or so. I feel like nu metal was the last decade to not decade, sorry, era to shamelessly wear its identity. You know, you've got a lot of bands now dress like average Joes, but not in the grunge way, in the like completely blank slate way, where it doesn't really feel like anyone intentionally wears anything now. It's just like,
oh well, I think a lot of it has to do, and we'll get into this with a lot of Machine Head's music, in my opinion. So much metal has just become a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and so even if it's good, it's still just kind of there, and so that we haven't had like anything that was like a, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a movement of music or a style that just sort of bombarded everybody. It's I mean, there's been in other kinds of music there have been, but in metal it seems like it all just kind of went, you know, different versions of similar things, and some bands are great and some bands are not. But
one thing I have noticed is like the growing, and I think this could be a good thing for both genres. I think there's a like chasm between metal and metalcore that is growing by the day, to where each one now is kind of going off and doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So like the metalcore bands I've heard are going off and taking the metalcore thing into kind of synth wavy territory, which is pretty cool as far as I'm concerned. But a lot of the metal stuff is getting a bit more stripped back again, and I like that, you know.
I appreciate both sides of that. I appreciate bands that are just trying to be old school with it, and I appreciate bands that are pissing everybody off because they're making an album with pop songs on it or whatever. Yeah. Even if I don't really want to listen to them, you know, or you get like what fucking Avenged Sevenfold did with their last album, where they just went completely left field. And I haven't gone back to listen to that album a lot, but I was like, I enjoy it. And I love that they did that, because it's like bands don't do that, and they should all the time.
I just like variety. Something I've learned from, especially from doing this podcast for the last 4 years now coming on, is that above all else, variety is king to my ears, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. You know, have a core sound and build off of it. Do different things, take risks.
I mean, that's the way every single day, like, especially like when I'm just hanging at home and playing records, as much as I love thrash metal, I play about 2 thrash metal albums, and then I got to go somewhere else. I can't, I'm not doing an entire night of the same kind of metal, no matter how much I love it. But anyway, but that back to what we were talking about. Where did you first come in contact with Machine Head?
Machine Head is for me a video game discovery, and they are one of the guest appearances on Guitar Hero Metallica.
Oh, okay.
They're one of like when you play through the career mode, you alternate between playing as Metallica and then playing as the support band. So you'll do like a support slot, then you'll get to play Metallica songs, and as you progress through the game, you unlock more cool shit, like different venues.
I didn't even play it that way. I think I just went and played the songs that you could play.
Yeah. Well, there's really 2 modes. Yeah. I mainly played the career mode back in the day, because I knew you could unlock other stuff like younger James, younger Lars, all those. I
feel like at this point I might actually enjoy that, but I don't have any way to play it.
But yeah, like I was saying, it was one of those moments where I hadn't really explored the heavier stuff yet. Like, so when I heard "Beautiful Morning," on this game, I was like, this seems like the next logical step for me, because I could identify a lot of the stuff I liked about Metallica in Machine Head, but it wasn't so extreme to the point it was inaccessible. It was still very accessible.
Yeah.
Which to a kid who already was open-minded to getting into the heavy stuff was, it just seemed like the next place to go.
Yeah.
So, I went from thrash metal to groove metal pretty smoothly, and I just kind of went from there.
Yeah.
But
which funny enough, with this band, Robb Flynn was in Violence,
yeah,
prior to starting Machine Head, which is looked upon as like, one of the best, thrash bands of that era. And they were great. I mean, they're still out there. I don't really care too much about what they're doing now because it's fine. But those first couple albums that they did are great. I love the first one. I love it just mostly because I like metal with odd vocals where people go, I would love it if it wasn't for that vocalist. That immediately makes me go, oh, I gotta go listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of those things. And then like about a year later, Unto the Locust dropped.
Yeah.
And I was really on board by that point. I had Burn My Eyes on my iPod. This was before I'd even started getting into buying physical copies. I was just like, I'll download it on iTunes. That's how long ago this is for me, because I was still doing that.
Yeah.
So then, after having heard Burn My Eyes several times and really liking it, they actually came out with a Metal Hammer exclusive Unto the Locust like magazine that came with the CD, but like a special edition of the CD with like a bonus live track, which I'm sure is a collector's item at this point. But I remember having this like whole Metal Hammer sized magazine just entirely about the history of Machine Head. And I was like, at that point, Metallica had become my favorite band because of that mini documentary on Live Shoot Binge and Purge. So I was like, I feel like I know these guys almost personally at this stage. So I was like, well, this just seems like the next step. So Machine Head were they were like my favorite modern metal band to Metallica's old school metal band.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So with that, I mean, I'm ready to get into it. If you don't really have a Machine Head origin story until today.
You heard it. I heard the Blackening but I knew Violence back in the 90s, but I don't know why I didn't know Machine Head. I think they just sort of got lost in the shuffle of bands around that time. Plus, like I got less into metal in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Just because I couldn't find stuff that was exciting me. And so they were probably just one of those bands that was out there and I wasn't actively out there listening to all the stuff. But let's do it because we have 10 albums to get through. And you're kind of steering the ship here because you'll know more about these than I do. Okay. I just know what I heard and what I thought. So let's do it. Let's start off with your number 10.
Okay, my number 10 is not an unpopular opinion, but I have a decent amount to say about this album that I also don't find very memorable. My number 10 is Catharsis from 2018. Okay. Now I want to immediately defend myself by saying I remember a lot of talk about Robb being a social justice warrior and the band going woke around this time.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the 2016 Dime Bash Phil Anselmo incident where Robb pretty quickly after the fact went online and made a video calling him out, and he really began to lean into calling out bigotry, which in the era this came out was unfortunately not a popular thing,
which is stupid because in my opinion that's one of the things that like I feel like I would probably get along with Robb because I'm not that kind of I'm not going to go out and talk about these things because that's not, I mean, unless I'm asked, but I get where he's coming from, and I don't know why it's become such a not metal thing to stand up for injustice. Yeah. It's like, just play the metal. But okay, whatever. But I'm with them when it comes to that kind of shit.
I mean, sure, yeah, thrash was built off of that, but sure, okay.
But that's if you actually pay attention to lyrics,
Yeah.
which nobody does. So
Go back to tremolo picking. Go back to skank beats. I don't like to be confronted with the truth. But yeah, anyway, I agree with what Rob had to say, However, the way many of the aforementioned topics are dealt with lyrically on the album, the result is kind of ham-fisted to the point where it's a distraction.
yeah, I would agree with that.
And like on top of that, the album is twice as long as it needs to be. And the most memorable moment of the album, unfortunately for me, is the same riff as a Strapping Young Lad song. So that is also an unfortunate thing where I've walked away from it thinking, that riff's cool, but it had been done. It was like an accidental thing, but that on, I think Beyond the Pale, I think it's called. But there's several moments on this album as well that sound like a Slipknot impression and or hark back, to the new metal of their late 90s, early 2000s era that, which after the growth that they'd done in a more progressive direction since 2003 into like this modern thrash groove powerhouse is really puzzling to me, because it's like, I thought we were past that, So you've got over 70 minutes of, I don't want to say dumbed down because it feels derogatory, but it's definitely more, it has more in common with Supercharger than it has in common with The Blackening, I think.
Yeah. Honestly, those aspects are what I like about this album.
Yeah.
Like as much as I like bands being more progressive with their stuff, there's so little of that new metalish stuff going on that when something sounds a little bit like that, I enjoy that part of it already. But
yeah, and honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that they'd already done that, I might enjoy that. But to me, it kind of suffers from the same thing that I feel The World Needs a Hero by Megadeth suffers from. It just feels like a major step back rather than a step forward. I'd say technically this may be more consistent than Supercharger, but Supercharger, which I'll get to very soon, has like at least a couple killer tracks on it with mostly okay album in between. Honestly, to me, they're on the same level, barring the fact that I just feel like I can kind of forgive younger Rob in the early 90s and 2000s for doing on the nose blunt lyrics.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a little bit more when it's coming from 50-year-old Rob, so
yeah.
And I think all the performances on this are fantastic. I think that they're all excellent players, and I agree with everything Rob had to say about the undeniably fucked Downbash incident. But it's done in a way that's still bloated and a bit cringe. But this is coming from a big fan of Machine Head.
Yeah,
especially my.
So the interesting thing about that, because a lot of what Machine Head do, in my opinion, is way too like almost good, but not quite when it comes to guitar riffs or pretty much anything. But the big thing is Rob's vocals. And the only time that I hear Rob and I go, he sounds good, is when he's rapping. That's the only time that I'm 100% behind Rob. When he's trying to do like metal singing vocals, I always feel like, man, if they had a better singer, this would be really good. But he's so kind of just like middle of the road vocally that it sounds like a metal vocalist impression almost, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, you know, I like Rob's vocals, but it definitely, I think of him mainly as a guitar player, and I feel like
Yeah.
someone had to step up to the vocal role.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he's definitely not awful and he's nowhere near the worst, but it's,
mm,
you know, I guess it works for their music, but
and I saw Machine Head about 10 years ago on the Bloodstone and Diamonds tour cycle. So I've been graced with the presence of Dave McClain twice. Uh,
nice.
but they put on one hell of a show and played probably the longest encore I've ever seen from any band. They basically just played two sets.
Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, Catharsis for me, it was a toss up between this and Supercharger, which I'll get to in a moment,
Okay.
for the bottom spot. But honestly, I had to be honest with myself, and I am more likely to revisit Supercharger than I am this one. So
Yeah. Okay.
over to you for number
Cool.
10.
All right. So before I get into this, I just want to say that like this is going through their entire discography and just jotting down notes, basically just thinking about what had the most that stood out to me. And then later on, I kind of went back and thought about it and put them in an order of like, well, what did I enjoy? And unfortunately, it's not as detailed as some because there's, you know, a lot of these albums I heard once. But I'm going to say that my number 10, I'm not trying to be edgy or contrarian or anything with my ranking. This is legitimately how I feel. My number 10 is Burn My Eyes from 1994.
Hold up. Huh?
Don't do things like that. The podcast listeners don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Explain.
So I feel when I was listening to this album, because it's an album that like people talk about a lot, and like people constantly point out that song Davidian, like it's something really great. And like the thought that I had when I was listening to this album, and I was like, okay, this is 1994. Was this kind of stuff happening around this time? And then really it would just be, I guess, Pantera. But Pantera were very different in the respect that so much about what they did had things that really stood out and were really great. Whereas Burn My Eyes almost feels like the birth of okay metal. Like, just sort of like, we're metal. Here's a metal song with metal parts and metal vocals and metal lyrics, metal drums, metal bass. Okay, cool. What else do you remember about it? I don't know. It was metal. I mean, it's like there's it's like, and so like every time a song would start, I would be like, man, this song is almost good. And I'm like, oh man, that riff is almost cool. Those vocals are almost good. It was just, it's so just like not quite getting there for me for an entire album. And then I started thinking about, well, yeah, but that's what so much metal became. So did it all start with Machine Head, where all of a sudden bands were like, yeah, we're just kind of like, whatever. and it's the thing that bothers me is it's whatever done with aggression, which is silly as fuck. So, and that's really all the only other thing I wrote down was some cool riffs, a lot of boring ones. Oh, and I wrote a dynamic vocalist would make this better, which is true. I believe most of their music would be better if they had a dynamic vocalist bringing it up. but there's just not. There's very little, especially on this album, that if you played this for me, I would just think to myself, "Oh, this band probably didn't last very long," because it just doesn't sound interesting. It really is so middle of the road that as I went through their discography and got to other albums, I went, well, yeah, they built upon this, so I'm going to give them that. They started at a point, and to me, they went up. But I don't have any history with this album, so it doesn't have any nostalgic quality to me at all. It was literally me, aside from the song Davidian, I'd never heard anything else. I mean, there may have been one other video from this that I'd seen, but I don't remember. But
I know there was one for Old.
Oh, Old's the other one, yeah. But just from my perspective as being like, an older person who is from that era, was into a lot of those bands around that era. When I go back and listen to this, I expected it to be so much better than it is, because it's 1994. So much great heavy music was happening in 1994. This isn't great. It's just there. So that's why I put it at number 10, because the one thing I kept thinking of as I went through all of their albums was, yeah, they got better. They got better at what they were doing. Even if I don't think it's amazing, they got better at doing it and improved upon it. So they started from here. So it's at number 10.
Okay. That one is further up on my list. What's that saying where it's like, I may not agree, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it, or something like that?
I don't expect anyone to agree with me. It's just this is why I pushed for this episode to happen, because I knew you'd have. I know you're not being contrarian, and you're I don't.
You're being authentic. I know.
I want to be fair.
There are people who will not get that.
To be fair, I want to like everything. Like that's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing that sucks, is that there's so much music, and I want to be wowed by everything, and I'm just not. So it happens.
Yeah, I realized, about 10 years too late for myself, coming up on 26 now, and I look back on my 16-year-old self, and I think to myself, God, you were an asshole to the kids who were into metalcore, dude. Like I look back, and deep down, if I'm honest with myself, I was just jealous of them because they enjoyed more stuff.
Yeah.
I can look back with the maturity of having been halfway through my 20s at this point. I can turn around and say, yeah, 16-year-old me was probably kind of a dick about that shit.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all were. Around that age. I mean, I was a dick in my 20s as well. So you already got me beat there. But
I think above all else, I agree with you. I want to like everything, but it just, my ears like what they like, and there are very specific conditions now for me to like something new. Something I will say that you've already talked about on your channel is that new Slope album.
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit. Everyone listening, I want you to go and save, what's it called? Freak Dreams?
Yeah, Freak Dreams.
Yeah, it's got a cool, like, sculpture head on it. It's like purple and blue.
Yeah.
Kicks ass.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many moments on that where I just thought, this is what music needs.
Yeah.
Just loads of cool, different, varied, memorable things.
But I think the problem with that, especially over here in the States, is that people don't want that. And unfortunately, Slope is getting lumped in with bands like Turnstile, which they have similarities. But people who like bands like Turnstile are looking at it and being like, this is dumb. And so they're not getting the traction that they deserve over here, I don't think. But it's my favorite album of the year so far, because there's not a lot of bands that are doing that in that way and that well, which is, it's basically funk metal, but it's a little more
it's funk metal it's funk metal with like beat down elements. It's got that like chug to it.
Yeah.
But honestly, the thing that stood out to me though was just how consistently good it was, and yet how there was a surprise around every corner.
Yep.
That for me is what made the late 80s and early 90s such a crazy interesting time for music.
Yeah, and when
heavy music,
and I got to interview the two vocalists from Slope, and that's one of the things that I talked to them about is I go, this feels like it could be back in that era where there didn't seem to be any rules and everyone was just kind of like, yeah, let's just carve our own place out, and we want to be funky or we want to be ultra heavy and fast. It's like who cares? Everyone was just doing their thing, and it produced so much great music.
If you'd have told me it was a long lost, before its time, 1992 funk metal album that had just been discovered and given a really good remaster, I would believe you. So if anyone's a fan of that, go check it out.
Yeah.
But with that, I guess we can cycle back around to
number 9.
Number nine. No more mail. I am warning you with peace and love. Peace and love. Okay, so what we got here? We've got number 9. My number 9 is Supercharger. Damn it.
Supercharger. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the second of their new metal albums. And to me, it feels like the watered down new metal one, whereas the Burning Red felt a bit more bombastic, you know? Even down to the way the band is presenting themselves. In 1999, it was like frosted tips, dreads, leopard print hair, whereas by the time this had rolled around, everybody had grown their hair out a little bit. Everybody looked a bit more normal.
Yeah.
And the whole package to me just felt like, okay, we had a Limp Bizkit album, and now we've got a Papa Roach album, where it's like,
well, yeah, with this one too, like I enjoyed things about this one, but it did feel a little bit like a bit of a retreat. So there's a little bit of the new metal going on, but it's almost like they started doing that and then went, and then so there's a little bit of a pullback on the album.
Yeah.
So
to me, it ends up veering into butt rock territory at points, So that's.
I love that term, butt rock.
Yeah, and I mean that with peace and love.
Yeah, we love butts over here. So
yeah. All the scholars are butt, man. So yeah, I mean, it's bookended by two absolute bangers with Bulldozer and Supercharger, but my problem here isn't the new metal. It's that it's just so generic compared to its predecessor. At least the previous album had a bit more bombast. This one has a much higher cringe to headbang ratio,
Yeah.
So, I mean, topping it off, like you kick off with the Declaration, which is, 71 seconds of an air raid siren and feedback, and literally just doing a Slipknot. But then you get Bulldozer, which is a fucking ripper. And then you get White Knuckle Blackout, which is a decent track, and it's got a kind of Corey Taylor-esque breakdown. This is a very Slipknot-y song.
Naughty.
Yeah, Slipknot-y.
It's naughty.
He's naughty. Naughty
you
bastard.
Naughty bugger.
The Brits. The big single, the fun fact about this album, though, is the song Crashing Around You. And Supercharger was released in October 2001. Do you remember what major event had happened the previous month?
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the old two big boys going down, if you catch my drift.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the lead and only single, Crashing Around You, was pulled from MTV and rock radio just as soon as it was added, despite it being the most added track in the US. The pull was a result of the metaphorical crashing lyric
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
song, but also the burning San Francisco skyline behind the band in the music video. It just, the whole thing, like this, and I feel like any other time there's a tragedy, there's like not this many controversial albums that come out, but you had this, you had God Hates Us All by Slayer that came out the day of the attack.
Yeah.
There's just so much stuff. I mean, I suppose it was such a major.
It was, yeah. I mean, you
So-
can't you can't downplay the impact and you know, and how it completely changed the landscape of so much over here. Like we talked
Yeah.
about this way back 4 years ago when we did Slayer. I talked about how I really do think that 9/11 kind of killed off so much of what was cool in my country. Like,
Yeah.
like the terrorists literally, in my opinion, I mean, aside from the deaths and which is horrible, it's a horrible tragedy, obviously, but they succeeded in completely fucking our country up. And that's even down to just a dude like me that loves music, because you started to see such a shift to where the idea of musical freedom, I guess, for lack of a better term, literally fucking died along with that. And I don't think we've ever I guess maybe we might be starting to recover now, 20 years down the line, but not very much, because there's a definite shift in not just what bands were doing, but how fans were acting. Because like the kind of shitheads that are out there now, I don't remember them being around in the 90s. Like, it's a modern thing to say something like keep politics out of your music. That is such a post 9/11 thing to say. Because before that, nobody said that shit. In fact, it was considered normal to see Megadeth and whoever doing political shit, because that's what you did, because your music was about this stuff. But post that, it's like it fucked so much up that like I hate the terrorists probably even more than some people do, because I'm just like, not only did they massacre and murder all those fucking people, but they literally just, I feel like my country was going slowly upwards to getting better and better in certain ways, and then all of that shit went away. And now we've been slowly trying to get back to, not we, but you know, people that are good people have been trying to get back slowly. But I understand it. It was a big fucking deal, and it was scary at the time.
Yeah.
So
I've seen a lot of people call that the spiritual end of the 90s. Like, obviously the 90s had ended, if we're being literal, the 90s had ended like 18 months before or some shit. But
yeah.
if we're being honest with ourselves, it was that event really that kicked off a whole very, very dark turn for the 2000s.
Yeah.
And I agree.
Let's talk about butts again. I got too serious.
But yeah, it's for me, this album, it has some great stuff on it, you know, with Bulldozer, Supercharger. I mean, Crashing Around You is a catchy single. American High is very seventh grader. And you know, I remember listening to it at the time and thinking, yeah, I relate to this. And now I look back and I think, man, you were 35 when you wrote this. So, but that being said, though, it's fucking killer. The songs Bulldozer and Supercharger, everything else it's okay. I would
Yeah.
give everything else on the album like a solid 3 stars, you know, but it is far from my most reached for album,
Yeah.
Supercharger. I honestly, I would give it, you know, a 2.5, 3 star sort of rating going on. But I know I very confusingly just said it's killer just now. I meant like a few songs, but yeah.
Yeah.
That
I
being
mean,
said, over to you, really.
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's coming from you that you're a fan. And so even the ones that you would give 2.5, 3 stars, there's things about them that you really like. And then there's me where this is just how I feel about these. So I'm not coming at it from a different angle. All right. Are you ready for this one? Number 9.
Okay.
The More Things Change from 1997.
Okay.
And if to sum it up, my note, it's their second album, and I wrote down the more things change, and then I wrote ... the more they stay the same, because this is more of the same shit after, what's that one called? Burn My Eyes. After Burn My Eyes, it's just better produced, sounds better. But once again, it's like, I feel like you kind of nailed it a little bit, because you keep, for their 2000 stuff, you keep bringing up Slipknot. And I feel like in the 90s, it was Pantera that they were kind of worshiping. And there's so much of that. It sounds like they're trying to write Pantera songs. And then later on, it sounds like they're trying to write Slipknot songs, which is that not great. But yeah. But that's all I wrote. I wrote better production, still Pantera worship without the songs or riffs. And so that's it. It sounds good. It still had the same sort of, every once in a while there'd be something that I liked, but overall I just went, wow, this is really kind of not very interesting. Compared to, well, I mean, I guess in 1997 it sticks out a little bit more as because there wasn't as much great heavy music in 97, but it was still out there. So, but yeah, it's mostly just, it goes at number 9 just because I feel like it's an improvement over Burn My Eyes, but it's still kind of in the same vein. And
yeah,
so it goes at number 9.
Cool. Again, I have it in a very different position on my list. But you know, that's the beautiful thing about this episode. I knew it was gonna have some very different takes to it. But my number 8 on this one, and this honestly is a result of me not having digested it nearly as much as the rest of the albums. My number 8 is of Kingdom and Crown, which is the latest release.
Yep.
It's better than Catharsis for me. It's definitely a return to it's kind of a return to the trajectory that I'd seen them on with the other albums leading up to Catharsis. It's kind of like pushed it back on track as opposed to off the beaten path. I think at this point it's a completely different lineup now, because so Dave McClain's not on this one either, so
well, no, he's full-time Sacred Reich. So
so the wow I'm realizing now that the lineup on this is completely different to the lineup that was existing when I got into the band. But you know, I think it's cool that there's vocals on it that aren't Rob at points, and it's cool that who's doing that. I forgot to write notes for this one. I do apologize, but there's a plot summary. It's a concept album.
I mean, yeah,
fair, but yeah. It's cool. It's cool. I like it.
When the first single came out, which is that Choke on the Ashes of Your Hate, I actually thought that was a cool track. Getting into the album was when it kind of lost some steam for me, but I liked that song.
I think Jared, the bass player, does the other vocal parts, and it's a cool album. It's a cool modern metal album. but I haven't really had the years with this one to digest it. I heard it for the first time this week,
Oh, okay.
and I haven't spent all that much time with it. I think in time it may grow on me, but if I'm being honest, it's kind of an album I heard and I was like, well, Machine Head are back on track, and it's better than Catharsis and it's better than Supercharger for me, so that's a good thing. But I've spent so much time with the other albums that it's a little bit like I wouldn't feel right putting it above anything else on my list.
Yeah.
So it looks lower than I feel it deserves to be, and I'm sure with time it may climb up. But overall, I think it's cool, and it's much less ham-fisted than the previous two albums felt to me.
Yeah.
So with that, they're back on track as far as I'm concerned. So
all right.
Your number 8, sir.
My number 8 is closer in ranking to you. My number 8 is Catharsis from 2018. Okay. Which at this point, when going through these albums, this is their 9th album. And my notes had gotten very I was kind of over it. And so I just wrote more of it. And then I wrote, okay. And then I wrote, not great production, but it's okay. That's all I wrote. And I think with this one, it was that some of it had that new metal, a little bit of a new metal tint. Honestly, when I remember when this album came out and people were mad that it was quote unquote new metal. And so I went, cool, I'm gonna go check it out. And I'm like, this isn't new metal.
Nah.
And it bums me out because I want there to be more actual new metal. And when I say that, I mean there are other bands that are being touted as new metal, but there's not enough groove. It's too much. Almost like they're just trying to make electronic music into metal, kind of, and they're called new metal, which is fine because some bands do that really well. But so with Catharsis, it was more like I was like, oh, it's kind of more of the same, just not quite as good as what they did previously. And so I ended up putting it at number 8 because I thought I wasn't impressed with the beginnings of the band. But at this point, going through an album where I really did think that they were building upon what they were doing, this was the first one where I went, okay, they kind of faltered a little bit here. So Catharsis is my number 8.
Cool. I'm gonna put my phone on airplane mode because it just buzzed, and it's on the same table as my mic. And I didn't even
hear it. So
okay. Oh, thank God. Yeah. So
number 7.
Number 8 wrapped up. Time for number 7. So my number 7 is The Burning Red from 1999. Now, This was the full-blown shift to nu metal. I've seen a lot of people say that they went nu metal on The More Things Change. They didn't go nu metal on The More Things Change. They just did slightly more focus on the groove. I would not call The More Things Change a nu metal album whatsoever. But that attitude to me, it always strikes me as ignorant. It's like, if you're going to call something like The More Things Change nu metal, you don't really know what you're talking about. It's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not going to take this person seriously.
Well, there is that question of where does groove metal end and nu metal begin when it comes to a kind of sound, because there's elements that overlap. So
absolutely. But if you're going to call any album in the Machine Head discography the shift to nu metal, it's got to be The Burning Red. Yeah, because The Burning Red, if The More Things Change had maybe a trait of it, which is groove, they were a groove metal band anyway.
Yeah, I don't remember there being any actual rapping on The More Things Change.
Exactly. Whereas this one, The Burning Red, is complete with frosted tips, PVC tracksuits, dreads, and fucking rapping, you know?
Yeah.
And as a lover of nu metal bands like Limp Bizkit and Korn, this album has its moments, but if I want this sound, I'll go listen to the bands that are the best at it. I have to be in a very specific mood for
Yeah.
this album. And when I listen to it and I'm in the mood for it, great. But the thing that I've always defended about this album is that Rob is a vocal lover of hip hop and always has been.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come off as a total bandwagon for money thing as people like to frame it as.
Yeah.
I think Rob was going to take this route inevitably anyway. You know, from the image perspective, they definitely took notes from their contemporary peers on the visual front.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, but to be fair, like I don't, you know, I've never been in a successful major label metal band. And there's that part of me that thinks you're in this band, you're playing these festivals, you're going on these tours, you're becoming friends with all of these bands. Now it's like you now have I don't know what you call it, like a peer group. And if you take the aspect of being in a band out of it, when you have a peer group and you all kind of get into the same thing. So a lot of bands that made kind of shifts like that, I've never looked at it unless you can come to me and tell me that they were given a check that said, if you do this, you will get this money. I will never call them sellouts, because I feel like you get influenced by what's going on around you. You're friends with these people, you're playing with these people, and you're like, oh, that sounds good. And the music just starts becoming that. And the problem is, we as an audience only hear the, you know, one album followed by the Burning Red, and it just sounds like they just automatically went nu metal. But I'm willing to bet there was probably an entire year of a shift. Probably Rob writing things, and the things became more groovy, and he went, you know what, this could do with some rapping. You know, I just feel that as much as I'm clearly not a fan of Machine Head. I don't like selling a band short and saying that they were jumping on a bandwagon or whatever, because I don't have any proof of that, and most of the time that's not true. It's just you're influenced by what's going on at the moment, you know.
Yeah, it's to me, when it kicks off with Desire to Fire, it does sound like, okay, these guys can do this, you know. It doesn't come off to me like, oh, this was a bad idea for them, because it's the fact that Rob can play and rap.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool to rap
and he does
play guitar.
And he doesn't ever have any lame things in his raps, like stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah.
Corey Taylor.
It's you got nothing left. The Blood, the Sweat, the Tears is a great song. Silver, From This Day. From This Day is the big single from this album. Exhale the Vial. Message in a Bottle cover. Now, what did you think of that?
I mean, I liked it. Honestly, this is an album that I enjoyed most of it.
Yeah.
It just felt, but once again, I think it's in hindsight and with 20 plus years of time passing, that stuff like this feels very energetic and fun to me.
Yeah. I think, you know, the quieter moments of this album as well have a kind of melancholic Nine Inch Nails influence to them too, which, you know, it's 1999. Everyone in some way was influenced by Nine Inch Nails at this point. You know, when Kurt died, Trent Reznor became like the next alternative icon, really.
I guess so. Like yeah.
You know, there was a pretty distinct industrial influence to the latter half of the 90s. In no small part, you know, Nine Inch Nails very influenced on the nu metal thing. Yeah. So, I mean, in total, I think as far as a nu metal album, goes, this is a pretty, faithful contribution to that whole thing. And I've always liked their cover of Message in a Bottle. I know it tends to divide opinions. Some fucking hate it, some love it. I very much I like it. I like that it's in the middle of the album. I like that it kind of breaks things up a little bit. And I think the Burning Red, the closing track, is one of the most heartfelt songs that this band has ever done. Yeah, it's a fun one. I think it's a lot better than Supercharger. So with that, over to you. That was my number 7.
You already talked about this one. My number 7 is Of Kingdom and Crown from 2022.
Okay.
Their 10th album. They do have a few albums that I hate the names because they sound so generic metal. Because I just go, I don't know, of Kingdom and Crown. It just sound, I don't know why it just makes me want to go to sleep just saying the name of the album. The sound of this album is really good. Like, I like the production on it. They have a handful of albums that I think sonically sound really good. There's some really good parts in this. This one I've actually heard a few times because I reviewed it on Old Bollocks when it came out. And so I got to listen to it a couple times back then. And I liked things about it. Things about it were just kind of whatever. And I kind of feel the same way where I said a lot of okay, still okay, gets boring at times. And so it's like, but like I got to the point where the word I was using over and over again in their albums was okay, because that's how I feel about so much of what they do. It's just okay. And this is their newest okay album. And I don't have much more to add. But yeah, some of it I did enjoy, some of it not so much. But once again, nothing that I would look at and go, this sucks. I get it. So I think that's probably what's so disappointing is like I don't feel emotional one way or the other. I just feel like, yeah, if somebody's like Machine Head's my favorite band, I'd be like, cool. I can't argue with you on that. I'm not gonna get out my notepad and like be like, here's why it sucks. Because I'm like, I get it. If this shit connects with you, then I absolutely get it. So on to number 6.
Were you thinking of that part from Futurama where there's that like completely neutral planet where everyone is gray?
I've never watched Futurama.
Oh, dude, missing out. But there's an episode where there's this like neutral planet. I can't remember the context of it, but like they get a transmission and the guy just like looks dead into the thing and goes, I have no strong feelings one way or the other. And
that feels like me.
Yeah.
I'm not like, I've said it a bunch of times that my life is so filled with music that it's hard for me to get into a lot of like TV show stuff. But I feel like shows like Futurama are a product. My not ever really watching it is a product of a fan base making a show seem shitty, because people that I've come in contact over the years that are into things like Futurama, they always are the most pretentious douchebags. And so I just go, well, if you're into it, I don't think I'm gonna be a part of that.
Well, hopefully my recommendation, I'm not a tool.
You're not. So
or at least I hope I'm not.
But once again, there's a lot of people that are into it and they can't all be douchebags, but it's just, too many seem a little bit iffy on that front. So
I'd say as far as adult animation goes, it's one of the best written I've ever watched. I'd say it's better written than Simpsons.
Yeah, I don't watch it. I mean, honestly, the only animated show that I still currently am watching is Bob's Burgers. That's it.
Bob's Burgers is great.
Which I did not expect to like it as much as I do. It's because my wife's into it, and so we started watching it, and I just got to the point where I started looking forward to seeing Bob's Burgers, and I'm just like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
If I look forward to seeing it, or when a season is over and I actually feel like I miss the characters or the show, that's when I know it's a show that I really like. Because there's plenty of things that I've very much enjoyed and then I never think about it again. But then there are some things that I think about it and I go, oh man, I'd kind of like to go and hang out with those characters a little bit more, you know?
Yeah. That's how me and my partner feel about American Dad. Like
Okay.
their front room is basically our front room at this point. It's very strange to see anything on the TV other than American Dad. Yeah. You know, I get home, it's time to do the chores, American Dad. Time to eat something, American Dad.
Hmm.
Time to go to sleep, American Dad. It's just become such a comforting thing where it just kind
Yeah,
of like
yeah,
it means I'm at home. I know exactly what you mean by the Bob's Burgers just being on,
yeah.
like and just getting into it. Yeah, God, I must have watched through each of those episodes at least 20 times. Um, God. Okay,
Number
so
six.
number six. My number six is Bloodstone and Diamonds from 2014.
Okay.
So this was the last album I remember from Machine Head where I was like actively following Machine Head a lot more.
Hmm.
My tastes are following 2014. I got really into the 80s and I was already really into the 90s stuff by the time Bloodstone and Diamonds, came out, but I was like just about to do that 80s glam deep dive that basically defined about 4 straight years of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
um and it you know when it came out, it was very much, this sounds how I would expect a Machine Head album to sound, but I also felt like at least the first like set of tracks and a few later in the album are really good,
Hmm.
sound really good. But honestly, when I looked at the track list, I was like, how does that one go again? And then I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, it's that one. But it's of that run from Through the Ashes of Empires, Blackening, Unto the Locust, and this one, I feel like this one was the least impactful in terms of its effect on me, because it was like, yeah, these guys have proven themselves a couple of times now, and it's also kind of the end of an era because it's the last album with oh wait, no. Oh no, it is the first album with Jared on bass. I stand corrected. Either way, this was the album where following my tastes got a lot more old school.
Yeah.
It's not that I ever went off Machine Head so much as a lot more music entered my life and ended up kind of
I
occupying a larger chunk of
I can't even imagine what that's like to all of a sudden have those doors open to all this stuff that you have to go back and discover that are old. Because
yeah.
I got to experience a lot of that as it was happening. But even to me, it still seems like a lot. So
Yeah.
just trying to keep up with what's new musically and realizing that there's so much older shit that's amazing. That's overwhelming.
That's why, that's why when I discovered the 80s metal stuff, like I'd always liked it, but I only knew a few bands. So
Yeah.
when I actually, thought to myself, if I like this so much, why haven't I just bought a bunch of albums? And then it was like, it was almost like it was Christmas for about 4 years, because I was like, oh, new band I love, time to
Yeah.
buy 5 albums at once. And it was a really cool time,
Yeah.
especially in college, because I just remember, and I would hear bands from friends and stuff because I was surrounded by so many like-minded people.
I feel like that's one of the best feelings in the world is when a band that has a substantial amount of content really clicks with you and you get that feeling of, oh, like I love this and there's 5 albums to go listen to. Like it's just something about it is just a lot of fun because it still happens to me occasionally too with some older bands.
That's why there's an entire portion of that shelf up there. They're behind a wall of cassettes at this point, but there is like an entire, I would say about that long, of all of those original album series, like
Yeah.
sets you can get that they
Hmm.
sell in, HMV and other music retailers, where it's like, hey, look, here's five, I don't know, a 5 album run from a band. Cool, snapping that up.
Yeah.
But back, especially when I was in college and I didn't have as much money, I was just thinking to myself, well, £3 for an album each, and I get five in. I think it's great value. And
Yeah.
this was before I had a streaming service or anything. So um, I did feel more inclined to listen to things that I'd bought.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do that more again nowadays, because I just find things en masse and then they just sit for ages before I get around to them.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was a case of go home, binge through them all in one go while I'm playing GTA. But I remember a big one for me was Faith No More. Faith No More was a 5 album pack
Yeah.
where I heard Midlife Crisis on GTA, and I saw the video for Epic, and I thought, I'm sold. I'm sold on
Yeah.
this band.
Yeah.
But yeah, honestly, just to talk about the actual album for a moment,
Yeah.
the songs "Now We Die," killer opener, "Killers and Kings," that's a good 1-2 punch. "Ghosts Will Haunt My Bones," that has a awesome riff to it. That something that I'll mention as well. Like, if there's one thing this band owns, it's adding natural harmonics to riffs.
Yeah.
So you'll get like I think that's a cool, distinctly Machine Head trait, and
Yeah.
it always puts a smile on my face when they do that. A late in the album track that stands out to me is "Beneath the Silt." Like, I think it's in like drop A tuning, and it's just a sludgy, good old sludge fest. "Game Over" is a great song. But if I'm being honest, in terms of impact on me, this album probably, if I'm stacking it up to the other 5 above it's an album where I'm like, it's really good, but it didn't really influence me or make me want to go out and explore as much as the other 5 did. So
Yeah.
for a young boy, growing up, this was a good starting point, because they were so influenced by a lot of stuff I'd end up loving. Like, a lot of their harmonies are very Iron Maiden influenced. A lot of their riffs are very Metallica influenced. A bit of Pantera in there on the earlier stuff, like you said. So it was a good jumping off point for a younger person to get into the older stuff. They're kind of like a gateway band,
Yeah.
I would say. So yeah, Bloodstone and Diamonds is cool. This is where I really like Machine Head's stuff. So yeah, that's my number 6 Rooney.
Cool. My number 6 is "Through the Ashes of Empires" from 2003.
Okay.
First off,
That's my
another.
number 5, so we can camp out here for a little bit.
Oh, nice. First off, it's another generic metal album title where I'm just
Yeah.
sometimes just putting words together that sound like that would sound cool if I said that was the name of our new album. And it's, at the end of the day, you look at it and go, what is even, who the, what? Anyway,
It definitely does. It does have that vibe of that faux poetic metalcore band name sort of thing.
Yeah.
Going for it. I will say that. Yeah.
But this one is another one because it's, you're getting to album number 5 and they've already fully just, gone away from the new metal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds good, and it's kind of they're getting to a point where I feel like they are kind of perfecting what Machine Head is.
Mm-hmm.
And with this album, because it sounds good, they're really good at what they do. It's just that what they do isn't quite good enough for me. But I feel like what I consider the best representation of them as a band, when it comes to my tastes, I feel like "Through the Ashes of Empires" is like a step to them getting like the ultimate Machine Head album.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember that it sounded good to me. So that's my number 6, and your number 5.
The cool thing about that is I can jump straight off of what you were saying, where it's like this is a more straight ahead groove metal thing again, but they've kind of updated it for the 2000s as opposed to the more Pantera-ish groove focused stuff. Like this is, if I was going to say that each Machine Head, if you're talking eras, their first 2 albums I would say are the groove metal era. The 3rd and 4th are the new metal era. This is probably like the new wave of American heavy metal era.
Yeah.
Where they're not a metalcore band. There's elements of it at times, but I would never say they went full metalcore. But to me, like Imperium, that song is a statement of intent, and there's so many different parts to it that are really fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like, and that's for a song that came out in the era that it did, to have so many different sections that are so different and be a single. I feel like that has the spirit of classic metal songs of old running through it. It's just that it came out in 2003.
Yeah,
you know?
you kind of have touched on what I think is a good point about Machine Head. Earlier you were talking about them being a gateway band, so there's that aspect of Machine Head where I feel like they're a really great band for somebody getting into metal. But at the same time, they're also a very good band that can just fit on pretty much any metal bill.
Yeah.
They could play with old school thrash bands. They could probably get away with playing with death metal bands and obviously metalcore or whatever. So there's a part of me that thinks, as much as I'm not super impressed with what they're doing, it is kind of impressive to be that kind of band.
Yeah.
Where
you're kind of versatile in a sense that you can play with anyone.
Well, you're versatile while kind of just doing your own thing, which is interesting. So that is pretty cool, but yeah. Seems like it'd be cooler to be in the band than listening to them.
Yeah, this one for me, it marked a return to form, and the lineup they have on this is just fucking phenomenal. Phil Demmel, killer guitar player. I mean, Adam Deuce was still in the band. He's an absolute unit. Dave McClain and Robb Flynn. This is probably, at this point, the most recognized and iconic lineup of Machine Head. You know, because like the first 3 albums have like a different lineup on them, and Supercharger wasn't well received. So
yeah, you know. Because all I remember was when Machine Head really came onto my radar, I would see, you know, footage of them playing, and I don't know how long this guy was in the band, but there was a guy in the band that kept having heart episodes on stage. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh shit! No, I don't.
I don't know because it's been years since I remember seeing the videos and reading about it, but I don't know if he was a guitar player. I think he was the other guitar player in the band, but he had some sort of condition where I think his heart would stop beating momentarily and he would pass out on stage.
Oh shit! Yeah, it's Phil Demmel. I didn't realize it was.
Oh, it is Phil. It is Phil Demmel. Okay.
Yeah.
Which he was. Yeah. Isn't Phil Demmel from Exorder? Was he from Exorder?
Let me have a look on his thing, biography. Wow, he also auditioned for lead vocals of Sepultura as the replacement for Max Cavalera, but he lost that position to Derek Green, which is cool.
Oh no, he played in Violence at some point.
Violence, Torque Metal, Allegiance, BPM, and Kerry King. And briefly played with Slayer.
He's playing with Kerry King's band now, the new Kerry King project.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't know that was him, but he's well known. But yeah, he had, I don't know if he's got it under control now, but I just remember it happening at least a few times where he would just collapse on stage And I was always just like, oh man, that's got to be awful to like have that kind of shit in your life, and like that, and all you want to do is just get on stage and play some fucking music, and your heart's like, fuck you, you know?
I had no idea. I had no idea that was a thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway,
I was just going to say, while we're on the subject, now that I just think it's funny that Kerry King puts out the solo album and all of a sudden Slayer's reunited. I'm like, is it Sonic? I haven't checked it out yet, but is there anything sonically different between Kerry King's solo thing and Slayer?
No, not really.
Yeah. So
even because he got Mark from Death Angel as the vocalist in that project, and he even sounds kind of like Tom Araya in the song. Wow. But I really do think this Slayer thing is not a permanent thing. I think they're coming back to play some shows. I don't think because I don't think they announced an actual like getting back together for more Slayer music. I really do. It probably boils down to, you know, especially somebody like Tom Araya, like you've been doing music for the majority of your life, and you start to miss it. Or from what I read, his wife really wanted him to do it. But it stems from, I miss playing, which I would understand. And so I would, if I were them, I would be like, yeah, we're not going to break up. We're just going to be kind of inactive here and there. And then we'll come back and play some shows. And then we're going to fuck off. And Kerry King will do his solo project thing or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what their ideas are, but I don't think, I really think we should put an end to farewell tours or announcements. If just start saying hiatus, even just say indefinite hiatus. But to be fair, then you don't get the fat paycheck of the farewell tour and then the fat paycheck of the reunion tour. So financially speaking, that's the right thing to do. But I just think so many fans just get a sour taste in their mouth when bands do that. Yeah. Especially when you're a band like Motley Crue that's like, we're going to sign a fucking document that says we're not getting back together.
I remember watching that happen and thinking, bullshit.
So I just think everyone should just stop doing that. Like, don't do just if you don't want to do it anymore. If a key member of your band wants to call it quits and you have to put the band to rest, just say it's an indefinite hiatus. We may never come back. Yeah. And then if you come back, it's like, hey, cool, surprise, nice. But whatever. To be fair though, like, you know, if Slayer comes through, I might go check them out. Even I don't care that they didn't retire. It's like, whatever. If they want to do it, then do it. And if you don't want to see it, don't go see it. Like that's the thing that I think so many people are missing these days. It's like, oh, there's this album that came out and you didn't like it. Guess what you can do? Fuck off, because it's not for you. So
cool.
Where are we? Are we still talking about? You still talking about
Through the Ashes of Empires?
Through the Ashes of Empires. Thermal count is rising. Perpetual rising. As I read our epitaph.
Whatever fucking weird noise.
That's a fucking. See, to me, that's a perfect album, but I still poke fun at that part because I'm just like, okay. Dave Mustaine talking and stuff is just always funny to me. Yeah. Always funny.
Dave Mustaine doing a fake British accent villain monologue is even better. You know?
Yeah.
Now I can only laugh as I read our epitaph. We end our life as moles. You know, it's the mole that gets me. Yeah. No.
So yeah, Through the Ashes of Empires.
Yeah.
We still you.
Yeah, Imperium, Bite the Bullet, Left Unfinished, Elegy. I just remember hearing all of these songs and thinking, really cool riffs, fun energy to it. It's, you know, there's thrashy moments, there's groovy moments, there's melodic moments. Honestly, that can be said for like the following three albums
Yeah.
in their discography, but I just feel like this was where they laid the groundwork for the stronger stuff that was in the pipeline.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely, I would say it's a very important album in their discography as like a turning point in, oh shit, we're on this path now.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the forgotten gem of the catalog because it's like this is the style that they would build off going forward, and it was a game changer for them. But it kind of gets overshadowed by its younger brethren.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for my number 5, Through the
Okay.
Ashes of Empires.
All right. Well, we're finally at number both our number fives. Man, this is a chunky boy, as you say. This episode.
Yeah.
My number 5 is Bloodstone and Diamonds from 2014, okay. And these are ones that like. There's not a lot differentiating how I feel about them because it's similar vibes. I mean, I realize they're 10 years apart from each other, but I feel like they're still doing a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like they kind of reached what I think is a peak, which is an album I haven't talked about yet. And then they start to kind of, it's almost like they're settling in and doing stuff, and it's not quite as an interesting collection of songs, but I do think that I still think that they're doing better stuff now than a handful of their earlier albums. But really, this one I still just wrote, some cool moments here and there, but still pretty just okay. And it's just like, it doesn't, it's hard to some of it kind of starts blending together. Not only with riffs, but also with song titles, because I'm all like, did they already do this song, or is this a song that 10 other bands did that's called the same thing? And it just kind of becomes very generic in certain ways. But that being said, that every one of these albums has a moment, or if sometimes more so, where I just go, that was cool. So but it's, yeah, we're literally in the middle, and that's how I feel. It's their middle albums where I just went, yeah, there's some stuff that is cool, and then some stuff that's not, but it's still overall a good quality metal album. So that's my number 5, Bloodstone and Diamonds.
Cool. So now we get to what I believe is the strong stuff. Okay. Like the real strong stuff. So my number 4 is 2011's Unto the Locust.
Okay. Yep.
And I remember when this came out, and I remember buying like I said earlier, I remember buying the like fan pack.
Yeah.
With the special edition like book version of the album. But I just remember it almost felt like this was, for a time, my band, where it was like, Metallica was my favorite, but Machine Head, I was doing such a deep dive on them. And it had been a little minute. I'd done Metallica, I'd done Slayer, I was most of the way through Priest's catalog. So I was looking for something new to sink my teeth into, and Machine Head ended up being that band on account of the fact that I had this basically encyclopedia. I've still got it here now somewhere. I think it's up there. But it was, like I said, it was a gateway into like 90s metal, which we all know where that led me. So, I just remember this coming out, and the songs on it's the shortest album. It's the shortest album in the catalog. If you exclude the bonus tracks that came with it. And it had a cover of The Sentinel by Judas Priest on it, like the special edition. And I'd gotten really into Priest, and that was one of my favorite, if not my favorite Priest song at the time. So I was like, fucking meant to be.
Yeah.
And I just remember hearing I Am Hell. Granted, the sonata in C sharp part is a little pretentious when it's, but I like that this album clocks in at like 50 minutes, even though there's only 7 tracks on it, because the songs are very well written.
Mm-hmm.
That all of the sections feel very deliberate. I feel like there's no wasted space. I suppose the only moment on the album where I do think, ooh, is maybe the kids singing at the beginning of Who We Are. But on the flip side, I also understand why Rob wanted his kids singing on one of his albums. It's like
Yeah.
it's like in a way that's cute, but when it kicks on, I'm like, okay, and now Rob's singing, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. It's cool. Yeah, and I feel like kind of an asshole for saying that, but it is one of those things. Like, and as I've gotten older and better at music, I'm like, yeah, that kid, one of the kids in the little choir there was a little off, but it's also endearing. But one of my favorite, like some of my favorite moments on this album are where it just breaks down and gets really filthy. And there's the breakdown at the end of Pearls Before the Swine has been like a mainstay for when I want something chuggy. And that like I love those like death metal-y trill harmony sort of things.
Yeah.
And the breakdown in Darkness Within is incredible. And that's a well-written song too. Locust is awesome. This is the end. Honestly, this is one of, I think the writing on this album is really strong. And it's, in terms of like progressiveness, this is probably the proggiest they got, with like, there's a lot of acoustic sections. There's a lot of very harmonized sections. There's a lot of variety packed into this 7-song track list. And honestly, I feel like I can't say enough good things about it. I remember for a time it was kind of like I got into this album in a time of my life I don't feel fond of, so I don't really have the nostalgic connection to it.
Yeah.
But when I hear it in retrospect now that I've been to therapy and I'm past all that shit, I'm able to recognize that, oh no, my 13-year-old ears were right. This is fucking sick. So yeah, Be Still and Know, This Is the End. I mean, these are all incredible songs, but it ended up at this point being edged out by a few more releases that when I listened back through them, I just thought, wow, this is, for me, why I got into so much stuff. Like it's like I said, it's a gateway. And honestly, I would say probably next to Pantera, Machine Head are arguably the reason I got into 90s music, next to San Andreas and that. But yeah, looking back, I might not be fond of this period of my adolescence, but I definitely can't deny the strength of this album being fucking good. So I guess over to you.
Cool. I mean, I had a good experience with that album. That's why I went even higher than you have it. My number 4 is Supercharger from 2001.
Okay.
So this one I think really ended up higher, mostly just because of, I feel like it's got a good energy to it, even though I was a little bit disappointed of the kind of backpedaling away from nu metal, because I think the nu metal parts of this album are like, I really enjoy the energy. The production also, I think it sounds really good too. And yeah, at this point, it's their fourth album, and I got to the point where, like, I started enjoying what they were doing, and but this one, it didn't. I enjoyed it, but it didn't. Something was not quite there for me with this one. But I would be lying if I said, like, that I didn't enjoy, like, some of the more even goofier, new metal moments. It's but, like, once again, it's 20 plus years hindsight, and me missing a lot of this kind of sound. And so yeah, I enjoyed it. And I don't and honestly, like, me, like, I whenever a band has what's considered like a weird or bad period, I always seem to gravitate towards those albums, because I always seem to feel like I understand where they were and what they were doing.
I feel that. Yeah.
Because I feel like so much of my life I've always been that guy in my group of friends, or when I was in bands. I was always in a band that wasn't necessarily doing what everyone else was doing, and what I was doing was never really looked at as cool. But I'm like, but there's something about that just, it stands out to me as enjoyable. So I put Supercharger at number 4.
Cool. So we're in the top 3 now.
Top 3.
Top 3. We are at the bronze medal, and for me, the coveted bronze medal goes to 2007's The Blackening, and it's great. Like, they were further refining the stuff they were doing on the previous album, but to me, they did it to absolute perfection here. Some of their most sprawling and progressive yet venomous performances are on this bad boy. Like I said, the first time I heard Beautiful Morning, it was on Guitar Hero Metallica back in 2010. My jaw was on the floor, particularly when it gets to that like, that breakdown was a mouth agape.
Yeah.
Moment. I mean, Clenching the Fists of Dissent, Beautiful Morning, Aesthetics of Hate, Now I Lay Thee Down, Halo. When I listened to Halo again, I felt this, like, wash of, this right here, this is why I remember being so obsessed with Machine Head, because I hadn't listened to Machine Head for a long time up to doing this, apart from maybe the first couple albums. And I rediscovered that everyone is on beast mode on The Blackening. I mean, it's across the whole thing. You've got umpteen moments that just reminded me of those early experiences of getting into metal, and hearing something like the end of Clenching the Fists of Dissent for the first time, and it just being the most crushing thing your young ears have heard at that point, or that everything builds for like 10 straight minutes up to this absolute chug fest at the end. I mean, Aesthetics of Hate, you can hear the anger in this song. And it's about an article written by this dude that was slagging off Dimebag after his death.
Yeah.
There's a couple familiar faces in the music video I remember seeing. Matt Heafy, the guy from Trivium. He's in the video. And it's a great way to spend an hour of your time, this album. As far as modern metal, as of how long ago is it now? 17 years ago? Jesus fucking Christ. As far as modern metal of the 2000s, I don't think you can get much better than this album. I think this album is an example that, even though it's not necessarily my favorite era, that great stuff has come out across all generations of music. and it really reminded me as to why this album stuck with me for so long, and how it got kind of lost in the sauce when I went on my 80s 90s deep dive years. But coming back to it with the hindsight of, so many years have passed that I've, been listening to other stuff, and I came back and it was like, wow, yeah, actually I remember this, and I remember this part, and I remember this part, and it wasn't all bad. I look back at that time and I'm reminded, it wasn't all a complete turd suck fest, but yeah, basically the Blackening is, to me, the best of their revived era, So yeah, with that, over to you.
Okay. I enjoy that album. It's not my number 3. My number 3 is Unto the Locust.
Okay.
Which I at this point, I feel like the band kind of was the best that they would be. With Unto the Locust, my only issue with this particular album is that once again, they follow up what I think is a really strong album with one that's not too much different, but just different enough to make it feel like a different album. But I feel like at this point, they had just become such a more interesting version of themselves, like to where they now, well, I guess even now they still kind of are doing that, where they just sound like their own band. They don't sound like they're really into Pantera or Slipknot. They sound like people that were into those bands.
Yeah.
But Unto the Locust, I just thought was really strong. And, for this kind of metal, I just think it's, I don't really have a lot, because a lot of my real thoughts are of my top 2. And how I feel about Unto the Locust will be related to how I feel about the Blackening, because I really think that the band that was the peak, that time period, just of songwriting and presentation and everything. I just feel like they were a very strong band. I mean, still are really, but I just think that musically speaking, around this time, it felt better quality. So that's my number 3, Unto the Locust.
Cool. So that brings me to my number 2. Which is The More Things Change.
All right. We have bookend.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I have a very distinct memory of this album, and my uncle, who also has a very distinct memory of this album. And in fact, I'm going to tell his story first. I remember that back when I almost knocked something off of my desk with my headphone wire. Back when he was at high school, he went to the same secondary school that I did. But obviously some good few years before that, about 20 years. But anyway, he went on the day that this came out. Like, he'd been watching it like a hawk. Like, he was a huge fan of Burn My Eyes, huge fan of the growing groove metal thing. And he'd been watching the release of this album like a hawk in Kerrang magazine and whatnot. And on the day that this came out, on a lunch break at the school, he ran from the school, which you're not really allowed to do. He ran from school to go to a music shop called Quarterdeck, and he ran and got the cassette version of this and ran back to school, having snuck back in.
That kind of story, it makes me I long for those days, but also I don't like the stress of it. But I just remember that the idea of I want to go to the record store immediately and get this.
Yeah.
And sometimes, depending on the kind of record store you have nearby, they might have 1 or 2 copies. You got to fucking run there and go get it. And sure, it's better that it's easier to get stuff now. but there's something special about that experience of
Yeah.
you got to go. Like people would wait in line for an
Yeah.
album release, and
It
that's doesn't really happen much anymore.
it definitely feels more special when there's a story connected to you getting something as opposed to I heard it on Spotify and I added it to my liked songs,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
That's one of the
Um,
reasons why, even though there are negatives to it and people like to shit on it, that's why I actually really enjoy Record Store Day whenever there are things that I want,
yeah.
because I get to experience a little bit of that feeling of, oh, I got to go early
Yeah.
and wait in a line and hopefully they have the thing that I want. Um,
Yeah.
but if I wanted to, then I can just wait until it's over and then pay double for it. But I don't want to do that. So,
No.
I get to experience a little bit of that, how I used to feel.
Yeah, it's one of those albums that for me it has such a personal connection for me as well because I
Mm-hmm.
remember I got this album for my 14th birthday, and not long after my 14th birthday was the infamous knee incident where
Okay.
at school an altercation happened between myself and a student which ended up in my knee getting absolutely fucked. Um, but essentially, I just remember being. This was one of my gym albums when I was doing the physiotherapy after the surgery.
Uh-huh.
Uh, we have the technology, we can rebuild him and all that.
Yeah.
I'd had the surgery. When the day the brace came off, and I'd started to be able to move my leg again because the muscle in it had like atrophied to the point where they took the brace off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I told this element of the story. I won't go into the gory details because long-time listeners already know it. But
Yeah.
basically, I remember they took the brace off, they took the bandages off. I still had staples in it, which was pretty gnarly looking.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, right, I want you to move your leg. And my brain was saying, leg move. Muscle had died to the point where it was like, leg no move.
Oh wow.
Brain move, leg no leg move. And it was like, oh well shit. I'm gonna learn how to walk again. So I was
Yeah.
walking between the two bars for like weeks trying to just get up and move,
Yeah.
with one crutch, slowly beginning to get back to learning how to walk with it. But I remember um, this album and the Great Southern Trendkill were in gym rotation when I was, building my knee back because I was like, fucking, I'm gonna come back and my knee is gonna be fucking stronger than it ever was, and like just that sort
Yeah.
of mood. And if I wasn't in that mood, it was probably Faith No More or Stone Temple Pilots. But this album takes me back to a time where I went through some tough shit, but
Mm-hmm.
came out the other end of it stronger in a way.
Yeah.
And for me, this one, I mean, I love the 90s groove metal sound. So I love a good filthy riff. And I think these albums have a vibe to them where it's like it's polished, but it's raw. And I like
Mm-hmm.
that about it. But man, like 10 Ton Hammer, great song. Take My Scars, great song. Struck a Nerve and Bay of Pigs are full blown thrash, hardcore inspired, visceral fuckers. Down to None is crushing. I remember hearing the ending of the front lines where there's that like slow double kick. There's a fast double kick, slow
Yeah.
groove
Slow
thing.
groove. Yeah.
Yeah, slow groove over a fast double kick, and I think honestly this birthed my love for that, where it's like like really cool thing there.
Mm-hmm.
Violate, it feels like the closest they ever got to a like grunge vibe, which is pretty cool. Blistering and Blood of the Zodiac, honestly, like I get your critiques, but it's just so emotionally tied to me that
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like it came to me at the right time, and I was in the right headspace for this exact sound to just lock in. And this was roughly around the time I got into grunge. So, yeah, I love every song here. I've heard them so many times. I'm just like, you're gonna get that fucking knee better, you motherfucker. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, More Things Change is my number 2.
Cool.
Over to EU.
All right. My number 2 is The Burning Red from 1999. Their third album, their rap metal, new metal album that to me is just really enjoyable. And like I said, I really think that Robb sounds his best when he's rapping. He's not amazing at it, but for some reason it just fits his voice well to me. I just think that the songs are really good. The production's a bit too dry for my taste, but that's really aside from some songs and riffs that just were a little bit just it had a large amount of things that I really enjoyed. And, you know, trend or no trend when it comes to new metal, it doesn't take away from the sort of infectious energy of it, which is probably why I enjoy a good amount of new metal, because there is kind of like a fucking, I don't know, just like a real sort of, for lack of a better term, like dumb masculine energy.
Yeah.
And
there is a certain, I want to fucking,
yeah. And when it comes to metal, sometimes that's fun. And so I really enjoyed a lot of The Burning Red. What?
Sorry, I just remembered that fucking. Podcast listeners won't have seen that, but I just saw myself in the little thing, and it reminded me of that part from. This is such a detour. I'm sorry, but you ever seen me? You ever seen Me, Myself, and Irene?
Not in a long time, but yeah, I have seen it.
Do you remember that part where one of his sons, where he's like, he may have advanced delusionary schizophrenia with involuntary narcissistic rage, but he is a very gentle person, and it immediately cuts to him driving like motherfucker, mama. Yeah. It's like I get that vibe. Yeah. That's the new metal.
That's The Burning Red right there.
Yeah.
and honestly, if we were talking about these albums back in 1999, I probably wouldn't have anything good to say about it. But at this point, it's very enjoyable. But I don't think it's their best, and so it's number 2. So on to your number 1, which is their debut.
Yep, which ended up being your number 10, which makes this one of the most interesting lists we have ever compared.
Yeah.
I mean, this to me is a scorcher. I mean, Davidian alone is enough for me to put this as a game-changing, influential album. I mean, it's a classic of the groove metal era. It's still rooted in the Bay Area thrash thing, but with an emphasis on the groovier end of it. But like, I remember hearing there's a very like, I don't know how, it always struck me as this is like, not in the body count way, but in the sense that this album has a certain like street vibe to it. It you know, they came from Oakland. They were in a rough area. They had to do a little bit of gangster shit to get by. And this, for me, always set a really good tone of like the early 90s, if it was a post-apocalyptic sort of thing. A lot of the lyrical themes and of the time, like, you know, the Waco siege, the 92 Los Angeles riots.
Both things that I watched unfold on the news.
Yeah.
That's especially the Waco thing. We watched it in school as it was happening. There was live footage. I don't even remember why they decided we needed to turn it on, but it was like we watched like the final moments where they're driving the tank into the building and all this
Wow.
stuff. We were just sitting in class watching the live coverage of this shit show that was
Yeah.
going on. And I remember that. I really remember just thinking like, what the fuck is this? Who are these people? Why? Because it didn't
Yeah.
make, it still doesn't make sense to me now, people that are extremists in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
But even then I was just like, what is this is not real, right?
This movie's realistic, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's for me, like this album, it came at a cool time for me because it was like I hadn't heard, Body Count yet, but
Oh.
this was like the closest thing to me as like a San Andreas backdrop with a thrash groove thing going
So
on.
I hear what you're saying, but this was 1994 and fucking State of the World Address by Biohazard was out that year.
Yeah, yeah.
That is that to me that completely puts this album to shame. And there's
Yeah.
some cheesy ass shit on that album, but I love it, man.
It's definitely like I'm I didn't live through that at the time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
in a way, it's very much a case that this is a gateway to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So through Burn My Eyes, I found, Urban Discipline, and I found this whole subsect of like heavy music that has that kind of scary reality based vibe to it.
We got is Biohazard on our list because they should be on there because they're back to that classic lineup of Biohazard is back together and they plan on making more music. Whether or not it's going to be any good, that remains to be seen. But I really enjoyed that period of Biohazard.
I can see that, like, this having come out in August '94, it could feel a little late to the game at the time.
Yeah, because it really is. If you're talking about a year that album came out and Far Beyond Driven came out, and then Machine Head is kind of like, hey, fellow kids, it really but like I said, I don't remember this album at all from 1994. Yeah, and I was listening to metal in 1994, so I don't know.
So for me, I never had that perspective. So it always just struck me as, here's a cool album with a cool vibe to it.
Yeah.
And, what was it? There's some quotes here where it's like reception. What did Q Magazine have to say? A violent grinding experience spikes with social comment and spruced up with some brain-tingling guitar solos, straddling the new 90s metal subject matter of religion, war, and injustice. Burn My Eyes is a colossal album, a landmark. And, as far as groove metal goes, there's several moments on this album that I just think fucking rule. There's Davidian, Old, Rage to Overcome, A Nation on Fire. A Nation on Fire at the end, where it just goes full on thrash, is fucking killer. Blood for Blood was one of my go-to fast songs to play on drums for a while. Now, I know the title's kind of cheesy, but I really like what they did with Real Eyes, Realize, Real Lies. Like, the actual, like, sonic thing that they achieved with that was really cool.
Yeah.
It was just, like, 3 straight minutes of this really cool, nasty, evil-sounding riff with, like, clips from the news of dark shit that was going on in the early 90s, Los Angeles riots, Waco, all sorts of that.
Yep.
And then finally you close the album out with Block. This is a ferocious closer. And I remember that there's a part right at the end where it's like you think the song's ended, and then you just hear these doom, 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 doom. Oh, doom. Like, I just remember hearing that and just thinking, nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I can definitely, On a timeline, yeah, it is a little late to the game, but for me, in terms of a groove metal album, this is one of my go-tos. And I think the beautiful thing about this album, and to an extent, the more things change, they still have that like old school-ish sound to them, whereas like Burning Red onward is a very modern sound, a very good, well executed modern sound compared to a lot of their contemporaries at the time. But to me, Burn My Eyes marries the old with the new. And like, honestly, if someone had asked me if this album came out in 1991 or 96, if I didn't know it was 94, it could have been any of those. Yeah. So I think on a time frame, it's late to the game for sure. Stuff like this had come out and arguably done it better. However, Burn My Eyes will forever have a special place in my heart, at least for being the gateway drug into 90s metal. And yeah. So that's my number one. I'm realizing now you still need to do your
my number one. My number one is what you said was the best of their modern stuff, The Blackening from 2007. I mean, to be fair, this is the album of theirs that I've heard the most, and the only one of theirs I ever owned.
Okay.
Just because you want to know, you don't want to know what will date it to this period of time, but I'm pretty sure I bought The Blackening because I was at a mall and I went to Hot Topic and it was on sale.
Wow, that is the most 2007 sentence that has ever left your mouth.
I had heard stuff from it that I liked, so I just decided to buy it to really like listen to the whole thing. But I'm pretty sure I bought it at a Hot Topic because Hot Topic back in that point, 2007, was pretty gothy, still metalish, a little emo-ish. But they had a music section with records and CDs.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, they had a little booth where they had like stuff that I hate it when it brings up hand things. I don't know if you even saw that, but it does like a little thing. Does it do it again? Yeah. What does it do if I let it load all the way? Oh, I'm raising my hand. All right. Lower hand. Lower the hand. Oh God, fuck you.
Lasers. Do the lasers.
Lasers.
There's the lasers. Hell yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so but I still do like a lot of this album. I feel like it's the best representation of Machine Head as the band that they have the ability to be. From the production to the songwriting to performances. In a world of like this kind of metal that to me is just sort of middle of the road and doesn't really make me super excited, but I understand the appeal of it. I feel like this is kind of the best example of that. Because maybe it's because they get a little bit more progressive with this, that it did kind of fill in a gap of like that kind of metal from back in the day where like Metallica is a good place to point at, where you would have these more epic metal songs alongside some just real raging metal songs. And so I think that's probably why I like this one the most. And yeah, but it's not an album that I'll throw on very often, but it is an album that if a song comes up off of it randomly, I ain't not turning it off because I'm like, it's some good shit on that. So The Blackening ends up being my number one. And yeah.
Nice. This is a big one.
So this didn't make me a Machine Head fan, but it definitely didn't make me a Machine Head hater. It leaves me kind of where I already was, where I was just like, okay, cool, Machine Head, whatever.
At least you've heard all the albums now.
Yeah, and I know which ones I don't care to listen to again, and which ones might get another spin every once in a while.
Mm.
But yeah. So there you go.
Sweet.
Yay, we did it. No, let me know. No, well, let's do a real one. We okay. Every time we finish a discography. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, we did it.
Nice.
Machine Head done all in one episode. 10 albums. Honestly, this is not that long for 10 albums when you think about it.
Yeah, we actually we kept it more concise than I expected. I thought we were going to run longer.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, it's only because I didn't have a whole lot to say. But I mean, that happens every now and then. But yeah. But I mean, I do like touching on these more, I guess, technically more modern bands. We don't do a lot that I would call modern, even though their first album was '94. I still consider Machine Head a modern band.
Yeah. I would say any band whose debut is 94 onward is eligible for the modern metal tag. Although I will say, like, while we're on the subject of that, at some point that's going to have to change. Like,
yeah. Well, no, here's the problem. There hasn't been another metal boom of a certain kind of metal that's popular. So true. We still have too many bands doing this middle of the road kind of stuff, and straight up rock bands have incorporated some of these elements, which I guess would make them the butt rock bands. And then heavier bands, you have bands that are considered death core. So they have death metal elements, but they also have elements that would be right at home in a Machine Head album. So I think everything's gotten so spread out that everything's been
subgenred to death.
That or people have just incorporated the same elements to where the same elements are just kind of represented in a different way. And sometimes those bands are great, but if you really think about it, that's why music that's 20 years old still just sounds like modern metal, because there hasn't been enough of a progression. Or think about it. It's so weird. For my birthday, and for a lot of birthdays with my family, because we love this place, we go to this diner that's called Hungry Like the Wolf.
Yeah.
And it's an 80s themed diner.
Nice.
And I have such a great time being there because all the stuff is decorated with 80s stuff. They have a big screen that plays 80s music videos all the time. Everything
so it's Cafe 80s from Back to the Future too.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
But I always think about man, it's like that when you think about what's considered 80s and a lot of the aesthetics of that place, it really is only maybe a 5-year period with little bits trickling in from the early 80s as well. Yeah. But you look at stuff and you go, that is 80s. But you can't look at something specifically and go, that is 2007. Because it's aside from technology getting better or whatever, it's like...
I'd say the only thing I could point to and say is 2007 would be the emo fringe.
Yeah.
Like that to me is when I think of that, but that's not metal. That's emo. That's a separate thing. It's adjacent to heavy music, and there are emo bands that, did the jerk stuff, and there are jerk bands that were emo. But it's definitely one of those things where metal, as in metal,
yeah.
It's a weird one. I as far as I'm concerned, the only major advancement I can think in the last, probably in the last 15 years has been the gent thing. But
nobody says that anymore. I don't even think that's a word that people use anymore.
I mean,
I haven't heard it.
I mean, in terms of And I wouldn't necessarily say that Gent ever really had like a cultural movement. It was more just a pissing contest between guitarists to say, "Hey, I've
Yeah,
got one more string than you." You know?
yeah.
But
But
I like some of that stuff.
even then, there's
But
nothing that carries over that has a specific vibe for like anyone. You know, like with
yeah,
80s stuff, people that didn't listen to the hair bands of the day still will see it and go, "That's an 80s hair band."
yeah,
You're not gonna go to these regular ass people and go, "What is this?" They're not gonna go, "It's a gent band." They're not gonna
no,
fucking know that. But I read something funny that somebody wrote where they were talking about how if they using the same timeline, if they made Back to the Future today, Marty would be traveling back to the 80s or 90s, and he probably wouldn't even want to leave. He would just be like, "Oh, cool, I'm here now. No, never
yeah,
mind. Don't need to go back to 2024. I'm good."
yeah,
So it's like,
yeah,
but yeah, you
great.
think about movies like that you know, a movie like the Wedding Singer, which is about the 80s, which when it came out was 10 years prior or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was like
It's
'98 that movie came out.
so there's something so interesting about the 80s and well, even the 70s. I'll throw those in there too. 70s, 80s, 90s. Each decade had its
Yeah,
own sort of identity, and then that's kind of gone away. But I think it's partially to blame. I would blame the internet, I guess.
yeah, I would say that
Um,
there's it's the death of what I've heard referred to as the monoculture, where it's like before, MTV would push bands and you would everybody watched the same shows.
yeah,
Everybody listened to whatever was popular on MTV. Sure, if you were, really in the underground in tape trading circles, you'd hear this like cool underground stuff that was coming up. But eventually that would find its place and its genre. Whereas
but
now,
but
every
even at that point, those people, if they were tape trading the Slayer demo, they also knew Duran Duran, and
yeah,
so I don't know.
yeah, yeah, it's one of those things now where I think everything is so accessible that it's just flooded with
Yeah, which
yeah,
that's the weird thing. Whenever I think about it, that it's a double edged sword. I guess I don't know if that's the right term here, but because of that, the ease of accessing all of this stuff, nothing is unique
yeah,
anymore, and the experience isn't unique anymore. But at the same time, it allows you and I to do this, and so I can't really complain that much because there are bonuses to what we have now, but it's definitely not. We don't have the unique experiences that we used to have. We have
yeah.
everybody's experiences. So
On the one hand, you get cranked and ranked. On the other
there you
hand,
go.
on the other hand, you get Twitter and what that's turned into. So,
it's
you know,
I love that nobody calls it X.
yeah, no,
It's
I
Twitter.
I flat out fucking refuse to call it X. It's Twitter. You still tweet on it, you
Yeah.
know?
Honestly, like if I wasn't if my what I do if I didn't need to be out there on all the platforms, Twitter would be the first one that would be gone because I'm just like
Yeah.
it's fucking useless.
I
It's dumb.
I turned off notifications on Twitter months ago because it was depressing me, dude. Like
Yeah.
I just every time I went on there, my faith in humanity sank further. It was like, oh, here's something fucked up, and here's some asshole defending it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, in places like that, I've carved out my little world where I don't go there to
Yeah,
scroll. I go there to look at just what's in my feed of the things that I'm following, and I post my little things, and I interact with whoever wants to interact with me, and then
yeah,
that's it. It's not. I'm not going and looking through trending stuff on Twitter because
yeah.
most of the time it is depressing. Anyway, that's an interesting way to end this, but um, we're done with Machine Head.
Cool.
And next week, are we doing like a slashed and mashed or a grooved and removed next week? Is that what we're doing? We can talk about this live. Whoever's still here, the peanut butter platypuses, aluminium squirrels, Belvedere ball sitters, they're all here. And they can get a little peek behind the curtain if they've lasted this long. What's next week?
Well, we have a choice. We have grooved and removed Anthrax, or we can do slashed and mashed Van Hagar.
Oh shit.
This is happening live. You heard it here first.
Oh man, I don't know. They both sound fun.
Well, we've got a band snugly nestled between those two episode ideas. So whichever we get to, we'll only have to wait another 2 weeks. Yeah.
I feel like we'll go with it. One of those 2 episodes is happening next week, guys.
And the other, you'll just have to wait a fortnight. So
yeah. But so that's one of those things. One of our little offshoots will be next week. But it's always fun, especially dealing with Anthrax or Van Halen. I love both those bands.
Yeah,
and the Van Hagar era. I love that too. And all right. Well, then, until next time, everybody, we appreciate you listening or watching and just being here. And put your Machine Head ranking in the comments of the video, or I don't know, tell me that you're disappointed in me for putting Burn My Eyes at number 10. So you know what, I disappoint myself many times, so I understand. But that's it for this episode of Cranked and Ranked. Thanks for being here. And as usual, I'm going to throw it over to Eddie Sparxx to take us out.
Later, dude.
I like to play.